Jake Martinez pulled the last box from their moving truck and set it down on the pristine driveway of their new home at 247 Maple Lane. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Willowbrook, estates where every lawn appeared measured to perfection, and every house maintained an identical beige color scheme that spoke of strict community standards. His wife Maria emerged from the garage, wiping her hands on a towel after organizing their exercise equipment. "This place looks like something out of a magazine," Jake said, surveying the immaculate neighborhood, where not a single blade of grass seemed out of place. Maria nodded while stretching her shoulders after the long day of moving. At 34, she maintained the lean, athletic build that came from years of disciplined training, though most people assumed she was simply a fitness enthusiast rather than someone who had spent a decade instructing the military's most elite soldiers. "The HOA packet they sent was pretty detailed," Maria replied, pulling out a thick folder of rules and regulations. "Lawn maintenance schedules, window treatment requirements, even specific paint colors we can use for trim." She flipped through pages of microscopic font, detailing everything from mailbox positioning to garbage can placement times. Their new neighbor, Linda Watson, approached from the house next door carrying a plate of cookies and wearing the kind of welcoming smile that suggested genuine friendliness rather than mere politeness. "You must be the Martinez family," she said warmly. "I'm Linda, and I wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood before Bob gets over here with his clipboard." Jake and Maria exchanged glances at the mention of a clipboard-wielding Bob. Linda noticed their expressions and laughed. "Bob Thompson is our HOA president. He takes his job very seriously. Retired police officer, so he runs this place like his personal jurisdiction. Not a bad guy, just very particular about rules and order." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Bob Thompson appeared from around the corner, walking with the measured stride of someone conducting an inspection. He wore khaki pants pressed to knife-sharp creases and a polo shirt with an embroidered badge that read HOA President in block letters. His gray hair was cut in a military-style fade, and his eyes swept over their property with practiced assessment. "Welcome to Willowbrook Estates," Bob announced, rather than offered. "I'm Bob Thompson, HOA President, and I wanted to go over some basic guidelines while you're getting settled." He produced the promised clipboard along with a pen that he clicked with obvious authority. "First thing I notice is your grass height. We maintain 2.5 inches maximum in this community. Appears to be approaching 3 inches, which puts you in violation status." Maria stepped forward, extending her hand in greeting. "Maria Martinez, and this is my husband Jake. We appreciate you stopping by. We just finished moving in today, so we haven't had a chance to address the lawn yet." Her handshake was firm and confident, the kind that suggested capability without being aggressive. Bob shook her hand while maintaining his clipboard with the other. "What line of work are you and Mrs. Martinez?" he asked, in the tone of someone conducting an interview rather than making conversation. "I run a fitness consulting business," Maria replied.
"I
"Work with clients on strength training and conditioning programs." She kept her answer simple and professional, avoiding any mention of her specific background or the nature of her expertise. And Mr. Martinez Bob continued turning his attention to Jake, who was beginning to understand this was more interrogation than welcome. "Software development. I work remotely, so I'll be home most days," Jake answered, looking forward to being part of the community here. Bob made notes on his clipboard. "Remote work is fine as long as there's no excessive noise or business traffic." "Mrs. Martinez, I assume your fitness consulting means clients coming to the house." His tone carried an implication that this might be problematic. "Actually, I usually work at client locations or at the gym facilities they prefer," Maria said.
I
"Do my own training here, but that's just personal fitness maintenance." She gestured toward their backyard where some of her equipment was visible through the gate. "Personal fitness training," Bob repeated, making another note. "What exactly does that involve?" His question carried the weight of someone who expected detailed answers to his inquiries. Maria felt Jake tense beside her, but maintained her diplomatic tone. "Standard strength and conditioning work. Nothing that would disturb neighbors or violate any community standards." She had learned long ago that the best way to handle overly curious officials was to provide accurate, but minimal information. Linda Watson had been watching this exchange with growing discomfort. "Bob, maybe we should let them finish unpacking. Before we get into all the details, they've had a long day, and there's plenty of time to go over community guidelines later." Bob looked at Linda with the expression of someone who didn't appreciate having his authority questioned, even politely. "Mrs. Watson, I find it's better to establish clear expectations from the beginning. Prevents misunderstandings later." He turned back to Maria. "I patrol this neighborhood regularly, Mrs. Martinez. Part of my responsibility as president is ensuring all residents follow community standards. I'll be keeping an eye on activities to make sure everything stays within guidelines." The phrase "keeping an eye on activities" struck Maria as odd phrasing for someone discussing community standards, but she simply nodded. "Of course, we want to be good neighbors and follow all the rules." Bob handed her a business card that listed his title as HOA President and Security Coordinator, along with his cell phone number. "Call me if you have any questions about procedures, or if you notice anything unusual in the neighborhood. I maintain detailed incident reports and violation logs for the monthly board meetings." After Bob departed, Linda lingered to chat while Jake and Maria continued organizing their belongings. "Don't take Bob too seriously," she said quietly. "He means well, but retirement hasn't been easy for him. This HOA position gives him something to focus on, maybe a little too much focus, if you ask me." "How long has he been president?" Jake asked, while carrying boxes toward the house. "He ran unopposed the last 2 elections, since most people don't want to deal with all the paperwork and meetings. The position comes with a lot of tedious responsibilities that Bob actually seems to enjoy." Linda paused as if considering whether to say more. "He's had some conflicts with other residents over interpretation of rules. Nothing too serious, but he can be pretty rigid about enforcement." Maria filed this information away while maintaining her friendly exterior. In her experience, people who craved authority positions often had issues with boundaries and control. She hoped Bob would simply be an overzealous administrator, rather than someone who might become a genuine problem. That evening, while unpacking their bedroom, Jake brought up the encounter with Bob. "That guy seemed pretty intense for an HOA president. The way he was questioning you felt more like a police interrogation than a neighborhood welcome." Maria was organizing her workout clothes in the closet, carefully separating her civilian fitness gear from the more specialized equipment she used to maintain her tactical skills. "Some people take volunteer positions very seriously. As long as we follow the rules and keep to ourselves, it shouldn't be an issue." "Are you going to tell people about your military background?" Jake asked, knowing his wife's tendency to keep that part of her life private in civilian settings. "Not unless it becomes relevant," Maria replied. "People sometimes get weird about military service, especially when they find out I was involved in training special operations. It's easier to just say, 'I work in fitness,' and leave it at that." Jake understood his wife's reasoning. Maria had spent 10 years in the Navy, with the last 6 focused on physical conditioning and tactical training for SEAL candidates. Her expertise in combat techniques, weapons, handling, and military strategy was extensive, but she preferred civilian life to remain separate from that background. She had retired at 30 with full benefits and now enjoyed the flexibility of private consulting work. The next morning, Maria woke at 5:30, as she had every day for the past 15 years. Military discipline had become so ingrained that her internal clock never wavered regardless of circumstances. She dressed in dark athletic wear and headed to their backyard, where she had set up a small training area with pull-up bars, resistance equipment, and space for bodyweight exercises. Her morning routine began with dynamic stretching, followed by strength training that incorporated movements designed to maintain the skills she had developed during her military career. To an untrained observer, her exercises might look unusual since they included tactical movements, climbing techniques, and combat conditioning that went far beyond typical civilian fitness. Maria had been working out for about 45 minutes when she noticed Bob Thompson walking slowly past their property. He appeared to be conducting some kind of patrol, but his pace suggested he was paying particular attention to her activities. She continued her routine, ignoring his presence while making mental notes about his behavior. The following week, Bob appeared at their door with another clipboard and a more formal demeanor. Mrs. Martinez, I need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to my attention regarding your activities. Maria opened the door wider, inviting him in, but Bob remained on the porch, suggesting this was an official rather than social visit. What kind of concerns? She asked, maintaining her polite tone. Several residents have reported unusual noise levels during your early morning workouts. Community quiet hours extend until 7 a.m., and your activities begin well before that time. Bob consulted his clipboard as if reading from official incident reports. I wasn't aware of any complaints, Maria said. My workouts don't involve any equipment that would make significant noise, just bodyweight exercises and stretching. There's also the matter of your training methods, Bob continued. Some neighbors have observed you performing what appear to be combat-related movements. This raises questions about the nature of your fitness consulting business and whether it's appropriate for a residential neighborhood. Maria felt her jaw tightened slightly but kept her expression neutral. I maintain my personal fitness with various exercises. There's nothing combat-related about standard strength training and conditioning. Bob made notes while she spoke. Mrs. Martinez, I'm going to need more specific information about your business activities and training background. If you're conducting any kind of martial arts or self-defense instruction on residential property that could violate our commercial activity restrictions. I'm not conducting any business activities on this property, Maria said firmly. My personal fitness routine is exactly that, personal. I'm not required to provide details about my exercise habits to the HOA as long as I'm not violating noise ordinances or other specific rules. Mrs. Martinez, I'm trying to work with you here, but I have a responsibility to investigate complaints and ensure all residents follow community guidelines. Your cooperation would be appreciated. Bob's tone suggested that cooperation wasn't really optional in his view. Jake appeared behind Maria. Having heard enough of the conversation to understand that Bob was overstepping his authority. Is there a specific rule or ordinance that my wife is violating? He asked. Because if not, this seems like harassment rather than legitimate HOA business. Bob straightened at the word harassment. Mr. Martinez, I don't appreciate implications about my conduct. I'm performing my duties as elected president of this homeowners association. If you have complaints about my methods, you're welcome to bring them up at the next board meeting. What we'd like is to be left alone to enjoy our property as long as we're not breaking any actual rules, Jake replied. Vague complaints about unusual exercises aren't specific violations. Bob closed his clipboard with a sharp snap. Monitoring the situation, Mr. Martinez. If there are continued disturbances or activities that don't conform to community standards, I'll be forced to take formal action. He walked away without waiting for a response. Maria closed the door and turned to Jake with an expression he recognized as her tactical assessment mode. He's escalating this unnecessarily. Most HOA disputes get resolved through conversation and compromise, but he's treating it like some kind of investigation. Do you think we should report this to the real police? Jake asked. His behavior is getting weird, and he keeps mentioning his background as a cop like that gives him more authority than he actually has. Not yet, Maria replied. Let's see if he backs down or if this continues to escalate. I don't want to create a bigger problem unless it becomes necessary. Over the following days, Maria became more aware of Bob's presence in their neighborhood. He seemed to time his patrols to coincide with her workout schedule and would walk slowly past their property, while obviously observing her activities. She also noticed him taking notes and occasionally photographs of their house and yard. Linda. Watson confirmed Maria's observations when she stopped by later that week. Bob has been asking questions about you guys, wanting to know about your schedules, what kind of car you drive when you have visitors. It's getting a little creepy if you ask me. What kind of questions? Maria asked while watering plants in their front yard. Yesterday he wanted to know if I'd seen any unusual activity at your house. When I asked what he meant, he said he was investigating reports of suspicious behavior, but wouldn't give me any details. Then he asked if I thought you might be involved in anything illegal. Linda looked uncomfortable sharing this information. Maria absorbed this information while maintaining her casual exterior. In her military experience, people who made vague accusations about suspicious behavior were usually trying to justify their own inappropriate conduct. Bob's question suggested he was building some kind of case against them, based on nothing more than his discomfort with her fitness routine. "Has he done this kind of thing with other residents?" Maria asked. "Not to this extent," Linda admitted. "He's had disputes about lawn maintenance and parking violations. But I've never seen him conduct surveillance on someone's house. It feels like he's decided you're some kind of threat, and he's trying to prove it." That weekend, Bob escalated his campaign by recruiting Steve Collins, the HOA vice president, to join his efforts. Steve was a longtime friend who shared Bob's law and order mentality, though he lacked Bob's police background. Together they began making more formal complaints and demanding more detailed responses to their questions about Maria's activities. The two men appeared at the Martinez door on Saturday, morning dressed in matching polo shirts with HOA badges and carrying official-looking folders. "Mrs. Martinez, we need to conduct a property inspection based on multiple violation reports," Bob announced, without preamble. "What kind of violations?" Maria asked, while noting that both men were wearing what appeared to be tactical gear, including utility belts and radio equipment that seemed excessive for HOA duties. "Unauthorized business activity, noise violations, and use of residential property for inappropriate training purposes." Steve read from a prepared list. "We need to inspect your backyard training area to document potential code violations." Maria stepped outside and closed the door behind her. "You don't have authority to inspect my property without proper legal documentation. If you believe there are actual violations, you need to follow official procedures through the county or city inspectors." "Mrs. Martinez, we are official procedures," Bob said with growing irritation. "I'm a retired police officer, and Steve here is vice president of the HOA board. We have authority to investigate violations and ensure compliance with community standards." "Being a retired police officer doesn't give you current law enforcement authority," Maria replied calmly. "And HOA positions don't include rights to enter private property without permission. I'm asking you to leave." Steve stepped closer to Maria in what appeared to be an intimidation tactic. "Mrs. Martinez, we're trying to handle this quietly within the community, but if you don't cooperate, we'll have to involve outside authorities. It would be better for everyone if you just let us take a look around." Maria recognized the good cop, bad cop routine and understood that both men were trying to pressure her into compliance through implied threats. Her military training had taught her to de-escalate when possible, but also to recognize when situations were moving toward confrontation. "I understand your concerns, but I'm not going to allow a property inspection without proper legal authority. If you believe there are genuine violations, please file appropriate complaints with the relevant government agencies." Maria's tone remained professional, but carried an underlying firmness that suggested further pressure would be counterproductive. Bob made notes in his folder while shaking his head. "Mrs. Martinez, your lack of cooperation is being documented. We'll be recommending formal action at the next board meeting, including potential fines and restrictions on your property use." After they left, Jake emerged from the house where he had been listening to the conversation. "Those guys are getting more aggressive." The way Steve got in your face felt like he was trying to provoke some kind of reaction. Maria nodded while watching Bob and Steve walk down the street, stopping to talk with other neighbors or fishing for something to use against us. "Bob seems convinced I'm hiding something illegal, and he's trying to pressure me into making a mistake or giving him an excuse to escalate further. Maybe it's time to be more direct about your background," Jake suggested. If Bob knew he was harassing a former military officer who trained Navy SEALs, he might back down. Or he might see it as a threat to his authority and escalate even more. Maria replied. "Some people with control issues get worse when they realize they're dealing with someone who has actual training and experience. Let's see what happens at this board meeting first." The HOA board meeting was held in the community center the following Thursday evening. Maria and Jake attended along with about 20 other residents, including Linda Watson and several neighbors who had been approached by Bob with questions about the Martinez family. Bob ran the meeting with military precision, using formal procedures and parliamentary language that made simple discussions feel like legal proceedings. When the agenda reached new business, Bob stood and opened his folder. With obvious preparation, "I need to address ongoing issues with residents who refuse to comply with community standards and cooperate with official HOA investigations." He didn't mention the Martinez family by name, but his pointed glances made it clear who he was discussing. We have documented evidence of early morning noise violations unauthorized, fitness activities that may constitute commercial business use, and refusal to allow proper inspection of potential code violations. Tom Bradley, another board member, raised his hand. Bob, are you talking about specific violations of written rules or general complaints about someone's behavior? Talking about a pattern of non-compliance and suspicious activity that threatens the security and character of our community, Bob replied. When residents refuse to answer reasonable questions about their activities and deny access for legitimate inspections, it raises serious concerns about what they might be hiding. Linda Watson stood up from the audience. Bob, I live next door to the Martinez family, and I haven't heard any unusual noise or seen any problematic activity. Their morning workouts are quieter than most people's lawnmowers, and they've been nothing but polite and respectful neighbors. Mrs. Watson, with all due respect, you may not be aware of the full scope of activities in question, Steve Collins interjected. This isn't about being neighborly, it's about ensuring all residents follow the same rules and standards, Maria decided. It was time to address the situation directly. I'd like to respond to these allegations, since they clearly refer to my family. She stood and faced the room with the confident bearing that came from years of addressing military personnel. Morning fitness routine begins at 5:30 and involves bodyweight exercises, stretching, and light equipment training. I maintain professional standards for noise levels, and I've never conducted business activities on residential property. The HOA president and vice president have repeatedly demanded access to my property and detailed information about my personal activities without citing specific rule violations. Tom Bradley looked between Maria and Bob with obvious concern. Are there actual noise complaints from neighbors or documented violations of written HOA rules? Bob consulted his papers. There have been reports of unusual activity and concerns about the appropriateness of certain training methods for a residential setting. What kind of training methods? Tom asked. Who reported these concerns? Bob appeared uncomfortable with the direct questioning. The specific details are part of an ongoing investigation. What matters is that residents need to cooperate with official inquiries and follow proper procedures when questions are raised about their activities. Maria remained standing. I'm not aware of any proper procedures that require residents to submit to property inspections or provide details about legal activities on their own property. If there are specific rule violations, I'd like to know what they are so I can address them appropriately. The meeting continued for another hour with Bob and Steve making vague accusations while other board members asked for specific details that never seemed to be forthcoming. It became clear to most attendees that this was a personal conflict rather than a legitimate community issue. After the meeting, Linda Watson approached Maria in the parking lot. That was ridiculous. Bob is obviously trying to force some kind of confrontation with you, but I can't figure out why. You've been model neighbors? Some people need to feel like they're in control, Maria replied. When they encounter someone who doesn't automatically defer to their authority, it can trigger escalation behavior. Jake joined them after loading folding chairs into their car. Do you think this will die down now that other board members have seen how thin Bob's complaints really are? I hope so, Maria said, though her tone suggested she wasn't optimistic. But people like Bob don't usually back down when they feel their authority has been challenged. If anything, tonight probably made him more determined to prove he was right. Maria's assessment proved accurate over the following week. Bob and Steve increased their patrol frequency and began taking more obvious photographs of the Martinez property. They also started approaching other neighbors with more pointed questions about whether they had seen anything suspicious or concerning about Maria's activities. Most neighbors ignored or dismissed these inquiries, but a few began avoiding the Martinez family, apparently uncomfortable with the attention Bob's campaign was drawing to their street. Maria noticed the social isolation and understood it was likely part of Bob's strategy to pressure them into compliance or relocation. The situation reached a new level when Maria discovered Bob had been researching her background through online searches and possibly through his police contacts. Linda Watson reported that Bob had been asking specific questions about Maria's work history and whether anyone knew details about her previous employment. He asked me if I knew where Maria worked. Before she started her fitness business, Linda explained during a conversation over the fence between their yards. When I said I didn't know, he suggested that maybe there was a reason she was so secretive about her past. Right? It felt like he was trying to get me to agree that something was suspicious about you. Maria realized that Bob's behavior was moving beyond HOA harassment into personal investigation territory. His police background was giving him access to research methods and possibly contacts that went beyond what a typical HOA president could or should be doing. That evening, Maria and Jake had a serious discussion about their options. He's not going to stop, Maria said while reviewing the documentation they had been keeping about Bob's behavior. In his mind, I represent some kind of threat to his authority, and he's going to keep escalating until something forces him to back down. What kind of escalation are you worried about? Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. People with Bob's personality type often see confrontation as the ultimate test of their authority. He's been building up to something bigger than just property inspections and HOA complaints. I think he's trying to provoke a situation where he can justify more aggressive action. Jake felt a chill at his wife's assessment. He had learned to trust Maria's tactical instincts, which had been honed through years of dealing with dangerous situations and unpredictable personalities. If she thought Bob was building toward a confrontation, it was probably going to happen sooner rather than later. Do you want to contact the police now, before things get worse? Jake asked. Maria considered the question carefully. The problem is that Bob hasn't technically broken any laws yet. He's been careful to stay within his claimed authority as HOA president, even though he's pushing boundaries. If we report him now, it becomes he said, she said, and his police background might give him credibility with officers who don't know the full situation. So what do? We document everything and stay alert. If Bob escalates to illegal behavior, then we'll have evidence to support our position. In the meantime, I'm going to be more careful about situational awareness and make sure I'm prepared if something does happen. Maria's preparation included reviewing the legal aspects of self-defense in their state and ensuring her personal safety equipment was easily accessible. She also began varying her workout schedule and location to make her activities less predictable, while maintaining her fitness standards. The additional precautions proved prescient when Bob and Steve began conducting what they called security patrols that focused heavily on the Martinez property. They purchased additional tactical equipment, including flashlights, radio headsets, and what appeared to be some kind of security badges that looked more official than their HOA credentials. Linda Watson reported seeing them in her backyard one evening, claiming they were investigating a possible property line dispute, though no such dispute existed. Other neighbors began complaining about Bob and Steve's increased presence and aggressive questioning about routine neighborhood activities. Tom Bradley called Maria directly to discuss the situation. Several board members are concerned about Bob's behavior. His focus on your family seems disproportionate to any actual HOA issues, and some of his methods are making other residents uncomfortable. What can the board do about it? Maria asked. We're exploring our options, but HOA president is an elected position and Bob hasn't technically violated any board policies. The problem is that he's interpreting his authority very broadly and using his police background to justify methods that seem inappropriate for neighborhood disputes. Maria understood the political complexities, but also recognized that official channels were unlikely to resolve the situation quickly enough to prevent continued escalation. She increased her vigilance and made sure Jake was aware of her concerns about potential confrontation. The confrontation came on a Saturday morning in early October, when Maria was conducting her usual workout routine in their backyard. The morning was crisp and clear with excellent visibility across the neighborhood. Maria had been exercising for about 30 minutes when she noticed Bob and Steve approaching through their side gate. Both men were dressed in full tactical gear, including utility belts, radio equipment, and official-looking badges. Bob was carrying what appeared to be a service weapon in a holster, while Steve had his smartphone out, apparently recording the encounter. Their approach was deliberate and coordinated, suggesting they had planned this confrontation carefully. Mrs. Martinez We're conducting an official investigation of suspicious activity and need you to comply with our instructions," Bob announced in his most authoritative voice. The phrasing was clearly chosen to sound like legitimate law enforcement action. Maria stopped her exercise routine and faced the two men while maintaining a non-threatening posture. Her years of training had taught her to de-escalate when possible, while remaining ready for rapid response if the situation deteriorated. "This is private property and I'm asking you to leave," Maria said calmly. "If you have official business, you need to present proper legal documentation and follow appropriate procedures. Mrs. Martinez, I'm placing you under citizen's arrest for suspicious activity, trespassing violations, and failure to comply with lawful orders," Bob replied while Steve continued recording. "You need to get on the ground immediately and place your hands behind your back." The absurdity of being arrested for suspicious activity on her own property might have been laughable under different circumstances, but Maria recognized that Bob was serious about his attempt to assert physical control over the situation. His hand moved toward his weapon while he repeated his order for her to comply. "I'm not complying with illegal orders from people who have no law enforcement authority," Maria replied, while carefully tracking both men's positions and movements. "You're trespassing on private property and you need to leave immediately." Bob's face reddened with frustration and anger. "Mrs. Martinez, I am a law enforcement officer and you will comply with my instructions or face the consequences."